Hello, everyone. So, for this first part of the lesson here, we're going to be talking about China and Japan post World War One. The first question that you had answered on the lesson here was taking a look at some of the things, hopefully, that we can remember about what was happening in China around this time in the 1800s and early 1900s. This slide hopefully looks a little familiar. We talked about the Opium Wars, the kind of invasion almost of European countries like Britain and France and Germany as they were able to take influence over different parts of China because of the import of opium, that highly addictive and dangerous drug. Uh, and from then on, we saw essentially more and more collapses of power in China. We had multiple rebellions. The Taiping Rebellion, the Boxer Rebellion was the one we watched the video on that last week before we left. It discussed how the people of China were unhappy with outside influencers, so mostly being Europeans, and trying to kick them out of the country. And it all kind of ended or culminated with this 1911 revolution where we saw the overthrow of the Qing dynasty. So remember all those dynasties in semester one that we talked about. Those are gone now. China doesn't have an emperor anymore. They're going to be electing a president. They're switching to a democratic form of government. And really going to be kind of looking to Western countries almost as a model. So, European countries and even the United States as examples as they move forward. Now, before World War One, Germany had some colonies around the world in Africa, but they were also in control of some territories in China. And when World War One broke out, the people of China, with their new democratic government, they thought maybe this is a chance for us to get rid of some European influences. So let's declare war on Germany to try and gain some favor amongst the Allied powers, so Germany and France and countries like that. China actually is going to help them out during World War One. Unfortunately for China, they're going to be kind of on the wrong end of the deal with the Treaty of Versailles, though, just as Germany was a little bit. China was essentially treated as a colony by the Treaty of Versailles, and control of their land, or almost the direction that they would move in, was put under control of Japan. Uh, so Japan essentially is going to say, okay, cool, we can do whatever we want with China. They're basically our colony now. That was kind of their goal, right? If we'll talk about China or Japan again here in a second, but Japan was essentially being treated as a world power now, and China was feeling like they were being left behind. The people of China thought that this meant that they were seen as a weak nation, and that's pretty much exactly what it was, right? They were being treated as a colony rather than its own nation. So on May 4th of 1919, we saw uh, thousands of protesters going out in this May 4th movement as the people of China say, we want our government to step up. We want to take back control of our country. We need to unite the country once again, and make China what it was before. Thinking back to like the Qing dynasty at its height, where they were kicking out Europeans because they felt that they were superior to the rest of the world. So we're going to see two political parties essentially start to butt heads here in China. The first is the one that's actually in power at this time, is called the Nationalist Party, or this fun word right here. It's pronounced Guomindang. Guomindang. Now, this was the government that was put in place in 1911, led by this guy, Chiang Kai shek. Lots of fun names here for us to say. This is essentially like a Western-ish style Democratic Party. They were uh, believing in industrialization as the way to make China strong. They said we need to focus on our factories and outputs, and essentially going through the Industrial Revolution, just like the rest of the world has, to get to the level that they're at. And this does have some support amongst the Chinese people. But a lot of people in China are starting to turn away from this form of government as it's not really working for everyone. And that's why we're going to see the rise of the Communist Party in China. Now, we're going to talk about this guy, Mao Zedong, quite a bit next week as he eventually, spoilers, he's going to take control of the entire country. But he is the leader of this Communist Party. It's a new party that is rising up. And essentially, he's saying that we need to help out the agriculture and the farmers, essentially the low level workers of the people of China. They're the ones that are being left behind by industrialization. And so he's going to promote these ideas of publicly owned land and shared profits, trying to eliminate classes. So put everybody on an equal playing field here. And later in the lesson, uh, we'll discuss what communism is and hopefully kind of what Mao Zedong's goals were. But those are our two parties. We have the Guomindang Party, which is the more Western promoted party, and then this new Communist Party that's really promoting this elimination of classes and essentially true equality. So a lot of people are starting to turn towards this communist dictatorship form of government, and the Guomindang feel that they're losing power, and so they originally were working with the Communist Party, the Guomindang were. They had formed this agreement that said that we need to work together to unite China into one country. They were also dealing with the Japanese that were trying to invade, right? Japan thought they had control of China, so they were trying to set up their empire, keeping China as a colony. And so they said, we're never going to get anything accomplished if we are constantly fighting each other. So let's kind of put our differences aside for a second and fight off these foreign invaders and make sure China can maintain its position essentially as a country. However, Chiang Kai-shek is going to eventually turn against these communist allies in 1927, and he's going to attack this other party. Essentially, he sees an opening that says, okay, this is our chance to kind of get rid of the communists and establish China as this, or as the country of the Guomindang. So this begins what is called the Chinese Civil War in 1927, and Mao Zedong and his forces are going to be forced to flee. You can see here that Chiang Kai-shek was not a fan of the communists. He called them a disease, saying that they're essentially killing the country. So then we're going to see the Long March. So Mao Zedong is able to escape the attacks by Chiang Kai-shek, and he's able to lead his 100,000 followers that he has left on a 6,000-mile trek across China to safety. Now, this was no easy feat. Most of the people were on foot during this, well, long march, right? It's appropriately named 6,000 miles for reference, walking across the United States twice. So going back and forth across the entire country. It's not an easy feat to do by any stretch of the imagination. Only about 8,000 people make it to the end of the march, but it kind of showed just the resilience of the Communist Party and how much they kind of believed in their cause. And so next week we'll see. Here's our map here. They started down here in southern China, had to work their way across and up to essentially what was safety by those standards back here. So next week, we'll see how Mao Zedong is actually going to turn this around, right? From 100,000 to the Long March to only 8,000 followers. How is he going to manage to take control of the entire country? So that will be in next week's lesson, and we'll talk about the rise of communism in this country. Now, talking about Japan here briefly, I had mentioned that they had gotten control of China as a colony. They were still going through their rapid industrialization. Remember, the Meiji Restoration was increasing their need for resources, so they wanted to make an empire, get those colonies, get those resources that they need to continue. And to do that, they were increasing their military power. Their essentially whole government was incredibly focused on making sure their military was as strong as possible because they felt it was vital to the future of the country. So Japan is going to invade northern China, an area called Manchuria in 1931, looking for two very important resources when it comes to industrialization. We have coal and iron. They're going to manage to take this area, and the people of China are kind of happy with this because they're starting to see their country almost on an equal footing now to the rest of the world. Now, since they are gaining more and more traction, more and more power, they're going to be looking to make new friends as well. So we're going to see something called the Anti-Comintern Pact. This is essentially an alliance between Japan and Germany, both concerned that they were going to be attacked by the Soviet Union. Italy's also going to join in on this. They're going to say, we're going to help each other if we're attacked by the Soviet Union. This is essentially an alliance that shouldn't have happened, considering the Treaty of Versailles said Germany wasn't supposed to, but Japan's going to do it anyway. Now, Japan is concerned that China could still come back and attack them, but luckily for them, the Guomindang had attacked the communists, and so China wasn't really in fighting shape to push back against the Japanese and take back the areas that they had lost. But eventually, they're going to start fighting in 1937. So lots of stuff going on here in Japan as well. So just kind of a basic overview there. The second part of the lesson here, you're also going to be reading about these things. So uh, uh, we'll take a look here at how this happens in China and Japan and also the rest of the world.